You know what they say about assumptions making an ass out of you and me. Well, on New Haven Station, the aliens had turned assumption into an art form. Take Zara Thek-Na, for instance. 6 foot tall, purple-skinned Veloxian with enough attitude to power a small moon. She was absolutely certain that her species had mastered the universe, especially medicine, right up until her kid got turned into roadkill by a hover bike. Little Pit Thek-Na, all of 8 years old in Veloxian years, had been showing off to some friends when physics decided to give him a harsh lesson in momentum. The kid went flying, hit a cargo container, and ended up looking like a pretzel that someone had tried to unfold with a sledgehammer. Now, you'd think this would be the part where the advanced alien medical system swooped in and saved the day. You'd be wrong. Dead wrong. Almost as wrong as Pip was about to be. Diagnosis complete, announced Dr. Vextar, the chief medical officer. He looked like a cross between a mantis and an accountant, which should have been Zara's first warning sign. Severe cranial trauma, multiple organ displacement, and catastrophic skeletal fractures. The probability of survival is 0.003%. That's it? Zara's voice cracked like a whip. That's your professional opinion? I'm afraid so. We've run the calculations through our most advanced diagnostic systems. The damage is simply too extensive for our medical procedures to address effectively. Here's where it gets really rich. These aliens, with their fancy quantum scanners and molecular reconstructors, couldn't figure out how to save a kid with what any human paramedic would recognize as a severe but treatable traumatic brain injury. They'd gotten so obsessed with their perfect little algorithms and probability matrices that they'd forgotten the most important rule of medicine. Sometimes you just have to roll up your sleeves and get your hands dirty. But Zara didn't know that. All she knew was that her baby was dying, and the most advanced medical facility in 3-star systems was basically shrugging its shoulders and writing out a death certificate. There must be something, she pleaded, her usual commanding presence crumbling like a house of cards. Some experimental treatment, some procedure you haven't tried. Dr. Vextar's mandibles clicked in what passed for sympathy among his species. I understand your distress, but we must be realistic. Perhaps it would be best to prepare for the inevitable. The inevitable. Right, because in the grand cosmic joke that was interspecies relations, the universe had decided that the most stubborn, pig-headed species in the galaxy would be the ones who actually knew how to keep people alive when it mattered most. And that's where Jake Murphy entered the picture, stage left, pushing a mop bucket and looking like he'd rather be literally anywhere else in the universe. Jake was what you might charitably call a character, 50-something, built like a beer barrel with arms and sporting the kind of 5 o'clock shadow that suggested he'd given up on personal grooming sometime around the Clinton administration. He wore the standard-issue janitor's jumpsuit like it was a punishment, which, in his case, it pretty much was. See, Jake used to be somebody. Dr. Jacob Murphy, trauma surgeon extraordinaire, the kind of guy who could perform miracles with a scalpel and a prayer. But then he'd had what the medical boards euphemistically called creative differences with hospital administration. Something about ignoring protocols to save lives, the bastards. So there he was, mopping floors and emptying trash cans, when he heard Zara's increasingly frantic voice echoing from the medical bay. You're telling me that with all your advanced technology you can't save my child? Jake paused, his mop dripping unnoticed onto the pristine station floor. He'd heard that particular tone before, desperation wrapped in anger, seasoned with a healthy dose of disbelief. It was the sound of someone watching their world collapse in real time. Ma'am, I understand your frustration, but our diagnostic algorithms are quite thorough. Then came the reply in that insufferably condescending tone that aliens used when they wanted to sound wise and instead came off like pompous idiots. Jake snorted. Diagnostic algorithms? Right. Because nothing said cutting-edge medicine like letting a computer decide who lived and who died. He wheeled his bucket closer to the medical bay, not because he was nosy, but because someone had to do something about the mess those aliens were making of basic triage. The fact that it gave him a perfect view of the situation was just a happy coincidence. Zara was pacing like a caged animal, Her purple skin flushed darker with stress. On the bio-bed, a small figure lay motionless under a tangle of monitoring equipment. Jake took one look at the kid and immediately knew what he was dealing with. Severe TBI, yes, but the kind that killed you from swelling, not from the initial impact. A classic case of increased intracranial pressure. The aliens were probably sitting around running simulations while the kid's brain was slowly being crushed by his own skull. Idiots, Jake muttered. Loud enough for Zara to hear. She spun around, her large eyes blazing with fury. Excuse me? I said idiots. You're doctors. They're idiots. Jake leaned on his mop handle like it was a walking stick. Kid's got a brain bleed. Needs immediate decompression. Instead, they're standing around with their thumbs up their collective asses running probability calculations. Zara's expression shifted from fury to horror. You're human. Guilty as charged. And you're watching your kid die while the most advanced medical facility in the sector plays 20 questions with a computer. How dare you? How dare I what? Tell you the truth? Your precious alien doctors have decided your kid's not worth saving because their little algorithm says so. Meanwhile, any human paramedic worth his salt could tell you exactly what's wrong and how to fix it. Zara stared at him, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. The idea that a human, a barbaric, primitive human, might know something her advanced alien doctors didn't was so fundamentally disturbing that it threatened to shatter her entire worldview. Which was exactly what Jake was counting on. Convincing Zara to let a human janitor save her kid was like trying to sell ice to an Eskimo. In space. During a blizzard. But desperation has a way of making people flexible about their prejudices. You're insane, she said for the 15th time as Jake led her through the maintenance tunnels beneath New Haven Station. Completely, utterly insane. Yeah, well, sanity's overrated, Jake replied, navigating the maze of pipes and conduits with practiced ease. Besides, insane is what you call it when it doesn't work. When it does work, they call it innovative. Behind them, Pip floated on an improvised stretcher that Jake had cobbled together from a maintenance cart and some anti-grav units. The kid was stable for now, but Jake could see the telltale signs of increasing pressure. They had maybe an hour before things went from bad to catastrophic. This is where you've been hiding? Zara asked as they emerged into what looked like a fully equipped medical facility tucked away in the forgotten corners of the station. Welcome to the Murphy Clinic, Jake said with a grin. We specialize in cases that are too weird, too difficult, or too politically inconvenient for the fancy doctors upstairs. The place was a study in organized chaos. Human medical equipment sat next to alien diagnostic tools, all of it jury-rigged together with the kind of creative engineering that made bureaucrats nervous. It was exactly the sort of place that would give safety inspectors nightmares and save lives in equal measure. Jake. A voice called out from the depths of the facility. Please tell me you're not bringing home another stray. Depends on your definition of stray, Jake called back. Bex, meet Zara. Zara, meet Bex. She's the one who keeps this place from exploding. Bex emerged from behind a bank of monitors, her purple hair clashing spectacularly with her grease-stained jumpsuit. She was maybe 30, with the kind of manic energy that suggested she'd been drinking caffeine intravenously since adolescence. Oh, great, Bex said, taking in the scene. Another impossible case. What is it this time? Quantum poisoning? Temporal displacement? Alien politicians? Kid's got a brain bleed. Needs immediate surgery. Surgery? Zara's voice went up an octave. You said you could help. Not that you were going to perform surgery. Lady, your kid's dying. Surgery is help. The alternative is standing around watching him die while very smart people explain why nothing can be done. Before Zara could respond, another voice cut through the tension. Well, well, well. If it isn't the good Dr. Murphy, once again attracting trouble like a magnet attracts iron filings. The speaker was Quantum, a reformed black market dealer who looked like someone had crossed a lizard with a used car salesman. He'd gotten his nickname from his habit of existing in a perpetual state of legal uncertainty. Probably guilty of everything, definitely guilty of nothing anyone could prove. Quantum, please tell me you've got a clean surgical suite ready, Jake said, already moving toward the operating area. For you, Doc. Always. Though I have to say, this is even more insane than your usual cases. And the kid's Veloxian. If something goes wrong, they'll have all our heads. Something's already going wrong, Jake pointed out, and the kid's dying. We can either try to save him and risk getting in trouble, or we can watch him die and guarantee that we'll have to live with it. Zara watched this exchange with growing amazement. These humans, these supposedly primitive barbarians, were talking about her son's life with the casual competence of people who'd been doing the impossible for so long that it had become routine. You really think you can save him? She asked quietly. Jake looked at her with something that might have been compassion. I think I can try. And sometimes that's enough. If you've never watched a human perform surgery on an alien, you're missing out on one of the universe's most terrifying spectacles. It's like watching someone try to fix a quantum computer with a hammer. Except when Jake Murphy did it, the damn thing actually worked. Okay, people, Jake announced, scrubbing his hands with the kind of thoroughness that suggested he'd done this a few thousand times before. We've got a Veloxian juvenile with severe traumatic brain injury and increased intracranial pressure. The good news is that Veloxian physiology is remarkably similar to human. The bad news is that we're operating with equipment that's older than my marriage. You were married? Bex asked, adjusting the lighting over the improvised operating table. Briefly. She left me for a tax attorney. Can you believe that? A tax attorney. I save lives, he finds loopholes. Guess which one she thought was more stable? Quantum was monitoring Pip's vital signs on a collection of devices that looked like they'd been assembled by a committee of caffeinated engineers. Hey, pressure's rising, Doc. Whatever you're going to do, you better do it fast. Zara stood in the corner, watching her son still form with the kind of focused intensity that suggested she was trying to will him back to consciousness through sheer force of maternal determination. Is he going to be okay? Define okay, Jake said, making his first incision with the steady hands of someone who'd learned his trade in the chaos of trauma wards. Will he live? Probably. Will he be the same? We'll find out. The thing about human medicine is that it's messy. Aliens, with their perfect diagnostic systems and sterile procedures, had forgotten that sometimes you had to get your hands dirty to save a life. Jake worked with the kind of controlled brutality that would have horrified alien medical boards and made human doctors nod in approval. There, he said, pointing to a small device he'd just placed in Pip's skull. Pressure release valve, completely improvised, totally not approved by any medical authority in known space, and almost certainly going to save his life. Almost certainly. Zara's voice was barely a whisper. Lady, this is medicine, not mathematics. We don't deal in certainties, we deal in probabilities and educated guesses. The good news is that I've been making educated guesses for 30 years, and I'm pretty good at it. Bex was monitoring the readouts with the intense focus of someone who'd learned that small details could mean the difference between success and catastrophe. Pressure's dropping. Vitals are stabilizing. Jake, I think it's working. Of course it's working, Jake said, though Zara could hear the relief in his voice. Human medicine has been keeping people alive for thousands of years. We didn't need fancy computers to figure out that when someone's brain is swelling, you give it room to swell. Quantum was already preparing the next phase of the procedure. So, what's the plan, Doc? We can't exactly waltz back into the medical bay and announce that the human janitor just performed miracle surgery. We don't announce anything, Jake said, his hands never stopping their precise work. We patch him up, stabilize him, and then we very carefully return him to the alien doctors. They'll run their tests, discover that he's miraculously recovered, and take all the credit. And you're okay with that? Zara asked. Jake looked at her over his surgical mask. Lady, I didn't become a doctor for the glory. I became a doctor to save lives. Everything else is just noise. As if to emphasize his point, Pip's eyes fluttered open, unfocused but unmistakably alive. Getting Pip back to the alien medical facility without anyone noticing was like trying to smuggle a tiger into a pet store. Impossible, but requiring a level of creativity that bordered on the supernatural. "Okay, here's the plan," Jake said, looking like a general planning the invasion of Normandy. "X, you're going to create a small electrical fire in Section C7. Nothing dangerous. Just enough smoke to trigger the emergency protocols." "I love it when you ask me to commit minor acts of sabotage," Bex said, gathering her tools with the enthusiasm of someone who'd found her calling in life. "Quantum, you're going to intercept the medical transport and swap out their patient with ours. I think you can manage that without getting us all arrested." "Please," Quantum said, looking offended. "I've been switching cargo manifests since before you humans discovered fire. This is child's play." "And me?" Zara asked, looking like she was still processing the fact that she was about to become an accessory to the most elaborate medical fraud in galactic history. "You're going to be the grieving mother who never left her son's side," Jake said. "When they bring Pip back, you're going to be so relieved that you don't ask too many questions about how he suddenly got better." Zara stared at him. "You want me to lie to the medical staff?" "I want you to keep your mouth shut and let your kid live," Jake said bluntly. "Look, I get it. This goes against everything you believe about how things should work. But sometimes the system fails, and when it does, you have to work around it. But what about you? What about recognition for what you've done?" Jake laughed, but there wasn't much humor in it. "Recognition? Lady, if anyone finds out what we did here, I'll be lucky if they only throw me in prison. More likely, they'll decide that humans are too dangerous to be allowed near medical facilities and ban us all from healthcare work. That's not fair. Fair's got nothing to do with it. This is about your kid getting to grow up. Everything else is just politics." 2 hours later, Pip was back in the alien medical facility, looking for all the world like he was recovering from his injuries through the miracle of advanced alien medicine. The doctors were baffled but pleased. Their diagnostic systems showed steady improvement, and they were more than happy to take credit for the successful treatment. Zara sat beside Pip's bed, holding his small hand and trying to process what had just happened. The human janitor had saved her son's life, asked for nothing in return, and then disappeared back into the maintenance tunnels like some kind of medical ghost. "Mom?" Pip's voice was weak but clear. "I'm here, baby," Zara said, tears streaming down her face. "I had the strangest dream," Pip said. "There was this human, and he was fixing my head with a wrench." Zara glanced around the medical bay, making sure none of the doctors were listening. "Just a dream, sweetheart. Just a dream." But as she sat there, watching her son recover from injuries that should have killed him, Zara couldn't shake the feeling that she owed a debt she could never repay to a man whose name she didn't even know. And somewhere in the maintenance tunnels, Jake Murphy was back to mopping floors, whistling off key and acting like he hadn't just performed a miracle. 6 months later, Zara Thekane stood before a gathering of Veloxian dignitaries and medical professionals, delivering a speech that would have been heartbreaking if it hadn't been such a masterpiece of irony. "We gather today to remember the children we have lost to medical incompetence," she said, her voice carrying across the memorial hall with the weight of genuine grief. "My son Pip was one of the fortunate ones. He survived his injuries, but only because the medical staff finally recognized the severity of his condition and took appropriate action." In the back of the hall, Jake Murphy sat in his maintenance uniform, invisible among the crowd of mourners and medical professionals. He listened to Zara's words with the kind of bitter amusement that comes from watching someone rewrite history in real time. "We must demand better from our medical institutions," Zara continued. "We must insist that they do better than simply calculating probabilities and accepting defeat. We must expect them to fight for our children with the same determination that we would fight for them ourselves." Jake had to admire her performance. She was threading the needle perfectly, criticizing the medical system without revealing the truth about what had actually happened. She was protecting him, protecting her son, and protecting the secret that connected them all. "The human janitor who works in this facility," she said, and Jake's blood ran cold. This individual represents everything that is wrong with our society's assumptions about other species. We dismiss them as primitive, as beneath our notice, as incapable of understanding our advanced ways. Oh no, Jake thought. Please don't do this. But perhaps, Zara said, her voice softening, we should remember that wisdom can come from unexpected places. That sometimes the most profound insights come from those we least expect to possess them. Jake relaxed slightly. She was being careful, making her point without crossing the line into dangerous territory. My son lives today because someone refused to accept that nothing could be done. I do not know who that someone was, but I will be grateful to them for the rest of my life. After the ceremony, Jake made his way back to the maintenance levels, expecting to return to his routine of mopping floors and fixing broken equipment. Instead, he found Zara waiting for him. I couldn't say it up there, she said quietly. But I needed to say it to you. Say what? Say what? Thank you. For giving me back my son, and for showing me that intelligence and compassion don't always come with advanced degrees and fancy titles. Jake shrugged. I did what anyone would do. No, Zara said firmly. You did what no one else would do. You risked everything to save a child who wasn't even your own species. Kid's a kid, Jake said. Species doesn't matter when someone's dying. Zara nodded, understanding perhaps for the first time the fundamental truth that had driven Jake to act. Do I see you again? Probably not, Jake said. I'll be transferred to another station soon. Too many people are starting to notice that the human janitor seems to be around whenever medical miracles happen. And Pip will be fine. Kid's tougher than he looks. He'll grow up. Maybe become a doctor himself. Maybe he'll remember the dream about the human who fixed his head with a wrench. Zara smiled through her tears. Maybe he will. As she walked away, Jake returned to his mop and bucket, thinking about the strange mathematics of heroism. In the official records, he didn't exist. In the medical journals, his work would never be mentioned. Right in the hearts of the people whose lives he'd saved, he was everything. And sometimes, Jake thought as he began mopping the floor, sometimes that was enough. The universe was full of species that thought they had all the answers, that believed their technology and their algorithms made them superior to everyone else. But at the end of the day, when the chips were down and lives hung in the balance, it was the stubborn, pig-headed humans who rolled up their sleeves and got to work. Jake Murphy whistled off key as he worked, secure in the knowledge that tomorrow would bring new problems, new challenges, and new opportunities to prove that humanity's greatest strength wasn't their technology or their intelligence. It was their refusal to give up.